Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, with my 2014-2015 Wild Card Weekend predictions. Well, last week, to end the regular season, I had a 12-4 record. I'm very happy with that, to have such another positive record to end the year out. And now overall for the year, or for the regular season, I ended the regular season going 169, 85, and 1. So that equals up to 66% of the games correct, and I'm happy with that percentage. We now have all playoff games set. We have, in the Wild Card Weekend, first at 4:40 on ESPN, you're going to have the 5-seeded Arizona Cardinals going to the 4-seeded Carolina Panthers. I think that'll be a fun game. You have one team that's gotten hot at the right time, and you have another team that's been pretty consistent for most of the year, but has leveled off over the last several weeks of the season to kind of have a sluggish finish to the playoffs. And then, of course, the Sunday night game, AFC North rivalry Part 3, Ravens at Steelers. Both games this year were decided by 20 points. They were both blowouts. This is a great rubber match. See how that's going to go. I'm very excited for that. It's going to be a tough, hard-nosed battle, even though for me, I'm one of those people that I really did not want to play this game as a Ravens fan. Not because, I'm not scared about playing them. I just know that these games are extremely physical. They're tough. They're hard-nosed, and we are going to have some injuries. And either if we're playing New England or Denver, either team is going to have to be 100% to at least have a puncher's chance in each of those games. And then, let's see. Then on Sunday, the 1 o'clock game with Cincinnati losing to Pittsburgh. They are now going to Indianapolis. This is another interesting game. You have the prodigy of the NFL and Andrew Luck into his third consecutive playoff appearances in as many years. And he is playing a quarterback that, just like him, is in his fourth playoff appearance in as many years, with the quest for getting that first playoff win, just like his head coach, Marvin Lewis. And speaking of head coaches, I will dabble briefly into what's happened over Black Monday and today. I know that Rex Ryan, Mike Smith, Tony Sparano is in a pool now of coaches. Mark Trestman and Jim Harbaugh, who mutually parted way with the Niners, all have got fired or been released from their teams. I think, for each one, I think Rex, it's a bit unfortunate because I thought that he was not the main reason that the Jets were struggling. I thought it was John Isdick, who had 19 picks in the 2 years, he's been there, and there was only one decent one in Sheldon Richardson. D. Milliner hasn't really panned out. Allen hasn't panned out. Percy Harvin really didn't do anything, even though, for the Jets, they might just cut him after this year starts because they owe him no money after this upcoming season. But for Rex, after going to 2 straight AFC Championship games in his first 2 years, he needed to at least make the playoffs this year or get a winning record, because you can't go 4 straight years of not making the playoffs. You just can't do that. Even though he had problems with the offense, he didn't really have a great, after the offensive line left, after some of their big offensive linemen left, he really couldn't get a good enough running game. He tried Ivory and Johnson, not a great combination. And, of course, he had Mark and Gino behind him and as his quarterbacks, and they've both been very inconsistent. And it's a shame for him to go, but I definitely will say this. Rex Ryan will probably be in the NFL next year, or he will be in the NFL next year. I am thinking more so as a head coach than a coordinator, just because of how well those players love playing for Rex Ryan, because he definitely gets that players aspect from his father, Buddy. And I think the two main teams that everybody should be looking out for the head coach role are the Atlanta Falcons and the Chicago Bears. Let's see. Rex. I did Rex. I'll go to Jim Harbaugh. I am very happy for him that he is going for the University of Michigan. I think it's a very big move for him, and I think it's the best move. Because if he went to another pro job, say the Oakland Raiders or the Jets, he would have to deal with management. And Jim Harbaugh is one of those people that is very power-driven. He likes having the power in his hands, and And at least at Michigan, even though he's going to have a lot more work to do, since he is going to have to do recruiting, but it's all the football aspects are in his control. And I think he will definitely appreciate that. He is going into, to my opinion, the fourth best conference in the Power 5 conferences in the Big Ten. And I think with him just being there, he's already ranked himself up as the third best coach in the Big Ten, behind, of course, Urban Meyer at Ohio State and Mark D'Antonio at Michigan State. And I think he can win right away. It stinks as a Maryland, being around the Maryland area, since we just moved into the Big Ten, that now we have to deal with Harbaugh now. But, good for him. And the best thing is he did so well in the NFL that if he ever wanted to come back, there would be plenty of coaching opportunities for him to look at. So, but the Niners, they now have a big question for their fans. All their fans are frustrated because he's been probably the most successful coach they've had since Steve Mariucci back in the late 90s. And now, depending on who they get, how successful is this guy going to be? And can he move forward this team into getting back to the Super Bowl or getting back to a level of respect? So we'll see. But kudos to Jim Harbaugh. Best of luck at the University of Michigan. Go Big Blue. Let's see. Mark Trestman. Mark Trestman was one of those scenarios where it was coming. You can't be an offensive-minded guy and score as lack of points as he did, especially with the talent he had. Because when you have arguably the best offense any coach would love to work with, when you have two legitimate number one tall receivers in Alshon Jeffrey and Brandon Marshall, you have Martellus Bennett, a good 6'4" tight end. You have one of the best versatile backs in the NFL with Matt Forte. And you have Jay Cutler, who I consider the modern-day Jeff George. And you can't score more than 30 points a game with that offense if you're the offensive quarterback whisperer kind of guy? Really? It's just something where the Bears sold their souls. Any Bear fan, or the city of Chicago's football, has always been about defense. Butkus, Singletary, Dent, all those guys. Perry. All those guys in that city's always been about defense. And then when they went to the offense, they sold their souls just because they knew that they had all the weapons. But they couldn't find the right guy to work with those weapons. So when they get a new head coach, when they're looking for one, I expect, again, Rex Ryan, Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles is my favorite defensive coordinator right now. He's done a tremendous job, a marvelous job as the Arizona defensive coordinator. And the best part for me, he has options, since he did sign a 3-year deal, 3-year extension with the Cardinals. So if he doesn't like any of the offers that he's getting, he can still be the defensive coordinator there and still be successful. And he will get a lot of weapons back with Darrell Washington, Darnell Dockett, John Abraham maybe. And he's going to get a lot of defensive guys back, and that defense will even be better than it is right now. But the last thing I need to do is get rid of Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler is the third piece to this puzzle. They fired the general manager who gave him the contract. They fired the guy that couldn't work with him. And when you're 91-year-old daughter of the original owner of the Bears is pissed off at the organization, that's a huge sign that there's going to be a lot of overturning in that team. And I think the last thing you need to do, get rid of Cutler and start fresh. See what David Fales has. And lastly, Mike Smith. He had his mulligan last year. I think that, again, he had to either get 9 wins or win the division. And he had the opportunity to, and his team laid an egg. 34-3. Two pick sixes by Matt Ryan. Very uncharacteristic of him. They were able to run the ball very well. And Cam Newton and that team, they look fresh. And they look, like the Panther team we're starting to see, from last year. It was fortunate enough, and congrats to the Panthers, being the first team in the NFC South's history to repeat as division champions. Very hard to do. Couldn't believe that stat till I heard it on the TV. But good for them. And Ron Rivera, you kept your job for another year. I can't argue with you guys being back in the playoffs, and especially if you win a playoff game. Look, is there a lot of room for improvement? Yes, there is. You definitely need to get a few more receivers, a better offensive line, and you need to get some secondary guys. But there's enough there that this team can, especially with how the NFC South is looking, for all the turnaround, that you could control this division for a little while longer. So those are my thoughts on, a lot of the big coaching changes And a lot of the last week's games, kudos, and very quickly I'll go through last week's games. Kudos to Seattle for getting the number 1 seed, beating the Rams 20-6. Not the most prettiest of games for Seattle, but that's how they play. And I guess I'm talking about coaches. I would like to mention this to anybody, and anybody that has any disagreements, I'm going to make this comment. I think it was a travesty that yesterday the St. Louis Rams did not. I repeat, this was a travesty that Jeff Fisher was not fired by the St. Louis Rams organization. Okay, let me explain. Jeff Fisher has been there for 3 years. The St. Louis Rams haven't had a winning season in almost 10. Okay? Or about 10 years. What has he really done for the Rams organization except keep them in their losing ways? I'd rather bring back Steve Spagnuolo. At least Steve Spagnuolo won 7 games, just like Fisher did. I feel bad for Spagnuolo. It's like, wait, you fired me after a 2-14 year? Well, you do realize that this guy right here hasn't really lifted this team up anywhere. Everybody was all, great about Fisher. And, I've talked to a few Rams fans, and they've said, well, look, we beat Denver 22-7. We beat the Seahawks. We beat the Niners. And I get those are big wins. And again, you have 2 shutouts as well. But how can a team that has that good of a defense, they have 3 games where you don't even allow an offense to score a touchdown, you beat the Denver Broncos, who are the number 2 seed in the AFC, and you beat the Seahawks, who are the number 1 seed in the NFC, but you only have 6 wins? How does that man in St. Louis still have a job? I don't get it. Because that team is way too talented, even with the quarterback problems, the running back problems. Even though Trey Mason had a great year, I think he definitely should be the starter. You need to the Rams need to realize this man's not the right guy. He's brought in all these defensive guys. That's great. But has that really helped that team win anything? No. It hasn't. Okay? So, again, I thought it was a travesty in St. Louis that he still kept his job. But it just continues to my point that now in this coming year, he's under a lot more pressure from me just because he needs to get a winning season together. Because that Rams team is way too talented to be losing as often as it is. And like I said, Steve Spagnuolo, I feel bad for you, sir. Because Jeff Fisher really hasn't lifted that team up from where you had it. And I think you could have done the same thing. If the general manager was there, he could have done the same thing. And you maybe could have lifted that team up higher than Fisher could. So, that's what I thought of that. But kudos to Seattle for getting number 1 seed. Green Bay, very tough game against Detroit. Very gritty. Felt bad for Rodgers, though. He had a calf problem going into the game. It didn't help him that Ndamukong Suh stepped on his leg accidentally, even though they did suspend him for the playoff game against the Cowboys this weekend, which is huge for them. But, Rodgers pulled out a tough game, and they are the number 2 seed. So if Seattle can somehow fall to Dallas or Carolina, Green Bay should probably get the Super Bowl. Because if there was any home field advantage that I would trust over behind Seattle's, it would be Green Bay's. Just of how they played. Over 40 points a game at home. 8-0 at home this year. Rodgers hasn't thrown an interception in any of those home games. It's like over 400 pass attempts now. That's incredibly impressive. So kudos for Green Bay. Dallas, congratulations for DeMarco and Dez for breaking the Cowboys single-season records in rushing yards and touchdowns, respectively. DeMarco getting 1,845, breaking Emmitt Smith's record at 95, and Dez getting 16, breaking Michael Irvin's record at 14, and T.O.'s at 15. So kudos to both of them, and congrats for the Cowboys for having a December to remember. Let's see some other teams here. Congrats for the Pittsburgh Steelers winning the AFC North, even though losing Le'Veon Bell will be huge in the game that we are playing with them against this week. So hopefully they can, fight back through it, or hopefully Dre Archer or Ben Tate. I know Ben Tate is going to Pittsburgh today to work out for him and maybe get a contract because they need running backs since they let go of LeGarrette Blount earlier in the year, and now he's in New England. So kudos to Pittsburgh for winning the North. And kudos, lastly, to the Baltimore Ravens for getting the last playoff spot. We did it. San Diego, Justin Houston breaking Derek Thomas's single-season sack record with 22 sacks, only 1 sack shy of breaking Michael Strahan's record. Incredibly impressive. And for that team, the Chiefs, very quickly, to win 9 games without a receiver scoring a touchdown, that's an incredible accomplishment by Andy Reid. He's kind of like he's like Bill O'Brien. What Bill O'Brien and Andy Reid have done with the offenses that they had to get 9 wins, that's incredibly impressive. One guy had to go through 4 quarterbacks. The other guy had 2 quarterbacks that did not throw a touchdown to a wide receiver the entire year, and they still won 9 games respectively. Kudos to both guys. There should be a lot of optimism, especially if they get some talented receivers or a quarterback, in Houston's case, to move forward. So, but, we were able to pull it out. Connor Shaw, he didn't play that bad. He showed his mobility, but he did throw that one last interception. And Flacco, he went on an expletive-filled tirade at halftime, even though we kind of deserved it after how bad we played. But we are in the dance, and everybody now has a clean slate. And we are one of the most experienced playoff teams in recent memory, and I'm excited that we have an opportunity. But I do not think we will win. And that is a great segue to go into my picks for Wild Card Weekend. Alright, so on Saturday, when the 5-seeded Arizona Cardinals go to the 4-seeded Carolina Panthers, I am taking the Carolina Panthers. And then in the Saturday night game, when the 6-seeded Baltimore Ravens go to the number 3-seeded Pittsburgh Steelers, I am taking the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then on Sunday, when the 5-seeded Cincinnati Bengals go to the 4-seeded Indianapolis Colts, I'm going to take the Indianapolis Colts. And then on the Sunday afternoon game, when the 6-seeded Detroit Lions go to the 3-seeded Dallas Cowboys, I am taking the Dallas Cowboys. Alright, time for my thoughts on each game. Arizona at Carolina. Again, these are 2 different teams that are going on 2 different directions. Carolina now has won 7 straight games in December, and they were blazing hot getting into this dance. Beating New Orleans 41-10, beating Cleveland 17-13, and beating beating Tampa 19-17, beating Cleveland 17-13, and then beating Atlanta 34-3. They are on a roll. And I feel that they're getting their confidence back. Cam Newton is playing at a level that we see the old Cam, and we're seeing the Cam Newton that can lead teams to victories, and that defense has gotten a lot better. They have really hankered down on yards. They've been able to run the ball a lot more often. Jonathan Stewart has the most rushing yards in the league since week 14. That's incredibly impressive. And I just look at this Panther team, and I feel that this is a very Seattle-New Orleans 2009-esque game. And that's what I'm looking at, is that Arizona, even though by far Arizona has a far better receiving core than Carolina does, and they have a much better defense, especially with the back end, with Peterson and Cromartie and Tyron. I just feel that if with this kind of game, Ryan Lindley won't be able to beat Cam Newton. If Cam Newton can run, because that's the thing, Ryan Lindley might have a stronger arm, and he has way better offensive talent to work with. Maybe besides running back, I'll give Carolina that edge. But I don't know if Todd Bowles will have his defense prepared enough for that dual threat that Carolina will not have to worry about with Ryan Lindley. Ryan Lindley, good for him that he finally threw a touchdown in his 7th start. It took him over 400 pass attempts to get a touchdown. But again, he did throw 3 interceptions that gave Jim Harbaugh his great send-off to end his Niners career with 49 wins. Little joke there. But I don't trust Lindley. I think Ryan Lindley, for the most part in 2 games, has not done very well. Again, was anybody surprised? No. This was a man that was cut before the season was started. He was picked up after Stanton went down and after Palmer went down because they needed quarterbacks. Could Lindley put up a fight? He could. Because he realizes how much, fans are going to be frustrated with him. And, they realize that there's a lot of pressure on this team just because this team, for a majority of the year, going into at least the final month, was the number 1 seed in the NFC. But I just feel that even though Arizona has all those advantages, I think Carolina's defense will get Lindley enough that they'll hit him, they'll sack him, and they'll stop him. And then Carolina can control the ball, restore and run the ball. That'll be enough to offset that defense. And Lindley's mistakes along with that will get the Panthers this win. This game will be competitive because Arizona's defense packs a punch, and they're tough, and they will put up a fight with anybody. But I think Ryan Lindley won't be able to beat Newton. Cam Newton, he's gonna try to get redemption for what happened last year in the playoffs against the Niners. And this is, a kind of a similar kind of team. And I think that he'll be motivated enough, and I don't think Lindley will be able to do enough to get them this win. Should be an interesting game. I'm going to take Cam and that Panther team that's motivated and on a roll over this Cardinal team that's been weaning a bit and lost its final 2 games of the regular season. Okay, next game, Pittsburgh over Baltimore. I'm just going with Pittsburgh just because I can't trust our secondary. Both secondaries I know aren't great. But the last time we were in Pittsburgh, we lost 43-23, and Big Ben threw 6 touchdowns. Do I think he will be, do I think he will do that again? No. But I just think that in this kind of game, and even though a big advantage for us will be if Le'Veon Bell can't play, because he is definitely their dual threat back, and if you look at maybe overall this year, just off this year alone, if you want to talk about the best dual threat back in the league, that is Le'Veon Bell for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He has been one of the most consistent, one of the most impressive young stars, and he should be up there in running back levels for years to come, and they found a great workhorse back that has a Pittsburgh mentality. But, so that'll be huge. But I think Dre Archer and Tate, if they get him, can do enough to hold off our running game. Our offense, for the most part, has done, pretty average over the last couple weeks. It took until the fourth quarter to beat the Browns with 2 big touchdown drives. Even though we are getting Haloti out of back, and that is huge, because we are definitely going to need him for this game. I just feel that in a game like this, Pittsburgh has been more impressive, and they've been on a bit more of a roll than we have. Okay, we had to hope San Diego choked and lost to the Chiefs for able us to get in, and they did. Okay, and I look at this and go, Pittsburgh has beaten us the last 2 playoff games we've had, 2008 AFC Championship game and the 2010 divisional round. So they've done this a couple times before. And even though recently over the last few years, the Pittsburgh-Baltimore series has been about even. We swept them the year before, and then in 2012, I think we split that one too. But a lot of these games, again, I think like they said, like 10 of the last 11 games have come down to 3 points. We got the last 2. And again, it's kind of funny. Both games were 20-point blowouts. So this is a great rubber match. But in this game, I'm going to take Pittsburgh's moxie and their offense to outbeat ours. Just because I haven't seen enough out of the Ravens' offense, and I know our secondary is awful. And with the weapons they have, I think Big Ben can outgun Flacco. Do we have a chance to win this game? Yeah, we do. It's Ravens-Steelers. Both teams have equally chances to win, and both teams know each other very well. But in a game like this, I'm going to take Pittsburgh because they have the better offense. And even though both secondaries aren't great, I don't think Flacco can outgun Roethlisberger with the way they've been playing recently. Should be a fun game, and that's why I'm going with Pittsburgh over Baltimore. Then the Sunday games, Indy over Cincinnati. This was fairly easy. Cincinnati, they might have lost A.J. Green, which might be the death knell anyway. But I just can't trust this Bengal team in the playoffs. After what happened last year, or the last couple years, because I've picked games over the last several years, and I've taken the Cincinnati Bengals the last 2 years to win playoff games, and they have ultimately disappointed me. I just can't do it this time. I've kind of jumped off the Bengal bandwagon with this playoff perspective. This is a road game. The last time they were in Indy, they were shut out 27-0. And speaking of records, congrats for Andrew Luck for breaking Peyton Manning's single-season passing record in Indy. Good for him. But I look at Indianapolis and go, they're rested. Okay, the Bengals defense, will they be tougher? Yeah. But I just think if it's Luck and Dalton, Luck's going to have all his weapons at disposal. Hopefully T.Y. Hilton can get healthy. That'll be huge. And I just can't see Andy Dalton being able to match that, especially with A.J. Green not there. Because if Mohamed Sanu's the number 1 receiver, they're pretty much done. And with that being said, I think that Marvin Lewis will get fired that Monday. Because he does not deserve still to be the head coach of the Bengals. If you're telling me after 12 years, 4 straight playoff appearances, 5 of the last 6 years this team has made the playoffs, and he still hasn't won a playoff game in a 12-year career, there is no way you keep that man as head coach of the Bengals. Should be an interesting game because, again, Dalton is desperate. This team is desperate. They paid this man, $96 million, and he needs to finally do it. It sucks that they couldn't have it at home because the last time they played him at home, they beat him. But that's how the breaks roll, and, kudos for Luck for being able to play New England once again. Should be interesting, but, again, that's why I'm going with the Colts. I trust that offense enough, and without A.J. Green, that defense can shut down that offense, how limited it is. Unless Jeremy Hill can definitely outrun that Colts defense, which has shown this year that they've been susceptible to the run. But yeah, that's why I'm taking the Colts to beat the Bengals. And finally, Cowboys over Lions. This is a very interesting game because these are two coaches that are about the same kind of position in their careers. Jason Garrett, kudos to the Cowboys for winning the NFC East, and for the first time since 2009. Congrats for them for being in the playoffs for the first time since 2009. Congrats for hosting since that you are in the playoffs, you're hosting a game, and you won the NFC East. Detroit just had to be in for the second time in the Stafford era in 2011, and the third time overall in the last 15 years this team has made the playoffs. Jim Caldwell has done a pretty consistent job, even though Terrell Austin, their defensive coordinator, deserves a lot of credit. To have the second best defense in the league, to have one of the best pass rushes in the league, even though now losing Sue is a huge reason why I'm not going to take the Lions, just because I've looked at Tony Romo in this offense, and they have a very 90s Cowboy-esque team here. They have one of the best offensive lines of football that I think can hold that Detroit defense enough. And I think DeMarco Murray can run effectively, especially with Sue and Nick Fairley, their other big defensive back on the inside. I think that their corners, Quinn, Slay, Hedebo, I don't think those guys can handle the Cowboy offense because, I think Dez has a huge height advantage over most of their corners. And the safeties, Witten and Williams, that's a good, combo matchup there. I like that. I like those odds. And also just Dallas and Romo has played much better. There are still games that you can see the old Stafford this year, and he's mostly been bailed out by his defense than his offense. And not having Sue and them there, I think that's going to be the big disaster. Because remember, Rod Marinelli is the former guy in Detroit, so he knows this team a little bit. Maybe not this one, because a lot of those guys that they've drafted have been new guys that he didn't have. But Rod Marinelli's defense can do enough where their offense will be lacking, because Detroit's offense is not very good. They're about 24th overall. I think they're in the almost bottom 5 in running the ball per game. And they really can't pass it that well either. And they rely on their defense. Does Detroit have a better defense than Dallas? Yes, they do. But I think Dallas's offense is way better than Detroit's because I think that with no pass rush, Romo will pick them to pieces. And that's better than Stafford. And they have a better running game. So they should be able to control the clock. The game should be interesting because, again, Dallas is only 4-4 at home. And the last time the Cowboys played the Lions in Dallas, Detroit was able to have a huge comeback, and they won that game. So, they played Tony before with a lot of these weapons still here, and they've been able to prove that they can win. But these two teams are different, two different trajectories, two different paths, and yes, that's why I'm going to take the Dallas Cowboys to beat the Lions. So that's it. So, and for everybody out there, for my Super Bowl prediction out of all the playoff teams, I did a video on my former channel, RackTube63, and I said Denver at Seattle before the season started. As much as I want to stay, and you guys can criticize me for jumping, I'm not going to be able to do that this time. I have to change. I'm going to say New England at Seattle. New England and Seattle will be at Phoenix, Arizona to play in the Super Bowl. So that's it. So like, comment, rate, subscribe. Best of luck to all the players, all the teams, and all fellow prognosticators and fellow fantasy players that are playing in playoff challenges. And for any of my viewers out there, any subscribers, any viewers that have any Xbox 360s and have Madden 15 on the 360, yeah, I'm thinking about getting the one eventually. But for right now, the Xbox 360, message me your gamer tags because I'd love to talk to you. If any of my viewers have the game and just want to talk football, message me your gamer tag and I'll hit you up. and we'll talk football, and we'll talk about your team. So again, best of luck to all the teams, all the players, all fellow prognosticators with their playoff predictions. And that's it. So like, comment, rate, subscribe. And this is Matthew Fanatic signing off. Till next week when I give you my divisional picks. So long.